Most companies begin their AI journey with a narrow focus, one tool, one workflow, optimizing one slow process. The interesting part is how they realize this repeatable pattern can be applied to other business operations. That's the story of today's guest. Brian Murphy is the president of Newbury Residential, a multifamily real estate operator with a dozen properties and a team of around 55 people. Newbury was built during COVID, so it started remote first with deliberately small corporate footprint. That constraint pushed them to automate by default. It started with one narrow tool: snap a photo of a receipt and have AI pull the details, map it to the right property, and geocode and push it to the property management system for about 400 receipts per month. From there, they kept going: mileage reports, resident payments, affordable housing compliance, and now customer-facing leasing management agents that know when to hand off a resident to a person for support. In our conversation, Brian walks through how their AI-first developer, Mike, got it started. He explains why he runs the math through actual code instead of trusting a model, and he suggests that on the right workflow, like lease audits, an AI agent is more accurate than a person. This is the Pragmatic AI Podcast. I am Mehrad Karamlou, Director of Product Growth at Kolena, and my guest today is Brian Murphy, President of Newbury Residential. Here's our conversation. Well, thank you very much, Brian, for taking the time to be part of the podcast today. I want to ask you for a quick introduction of yourself, what Newbury does, and tell us, audience, what line of business you guys are in.
Sure. My name is Brian Murphy. I'm the president of Newbury Residential. We basically are a property management company. We also handle the real estate investment side of the business as well. So, we purchase multifamily properties. We have about 12 properties right now, all kind of varying sizes, but roughly, 40 to 220 units each property. So we purchase the properties. We do, basically increase value and try to do other value-added projects along the way. But our day-to-day is essentially, property management. So, operating those properties, moving folks in, moving folks out, kind of the day-to-day, collections and leasing, et cetera, et cetera.
Right. That's pretty cool. What is Newbury like? What does the teams look like? Which regions do you operate in?
Yeah, so we started during COVID. So like the home office essentially is remote for all intents and purposes. And then we have roughly 55 employees. Most of them are on site. So we have, like I said, 12 properties. So, each property will have a property manager, maintenance supervisor, and then depending on the size of the property, it might have multiple techs or multiple, leasing agents, assistant managers, et cetera. And then I had mentioned we do a lot of, value add projects. So we have, whole construction and operations crew as well.
Interesting. Tell me a little bit about that, like starting during COVID. I'm assuming like there must have been some challenges associated with getting a business started during that time.
Well, it's interesting because we didn't have the challenges of like setting up an office and trying to hire people that were, in our regional area. So we have actually a very small footprint of a team that like helps from like a corporate standpoint, which is why kind of, we try to take advantage of any automation AI tools that we can to streamline our processes without kind of bringing on people that are like, corporate or home office related.
That's very interesting. That's a very interesting perspective of you guys just started remote first and then you started looking at all these remote intensive sort of technologies in your workflows. That brings me, how did your search for sort of quote unquote AI solution start? What's your journey look like in getting exposed to AI and thinking about it in terms of your operations?
Yeah, well, to be honest with you, I can't take too much credit for it. We have, a developer on the team who does a fantastic job and actually has been kind of AI first minded. So our journey basically started when we had a major issue with respect to, we use credit cards. We probably have 25 team members with a credit card. They all have receipts that need to get uploaded and all of the bookkeeping needs to be handled. we use one credit card and it gets spread across multiple properties depending on what's being purchased. And so the challenge we had was we have 400 receipts in a month. How do we get those uploaded? So we actually created a tool. I didn't create the tool, but our developer Mike created the tool. Essentially, you just take a picture of a receipt, hit AI, reads that receipt, figures out who the vendor is, the date of the purchase, the amount, and then we do some back end stuff. He created a portal as well where that receipt gets uploaded. We tag it to a property of multiple properties. We tag it to a GL, and then we push it into our ERP, which is our property management software. So we kind of started there, but at the same time, we're receiving invoices from probably hundreds of vendors at this point. So one of those challenges is like, how do we get all of those paid and input? So that was what we've actually moved over to using Kolena a lot for. And then in addition to that, we've kind of found other use cases. And like in our industry, we're doing compliance work. So one of our use cases is with respect to compliance, and as opposed to just a human kind of going through those files, we run it through AI. We have a prompt that checks on certain things. And then in addition to that, we're just starting to kind of roll out more of like conversational AI for leasing purposes and payments and renewals, et cetera. So I think initially with respect to the receipt project that we had, we were using like a text extractor. And then I think the models got so good that we basically were like, oh, we could just push it to, I think initially he was pushing it to ChatGPT, but now it's actually probably getting pushed to Claude. And it basically can do as good or probably a better job. And it actually handles, differentiation amongst like those receipts better than like a text extractor was doing. So that was probably middle of last year. And then as most people know, like the models have continued to improve in such a way that, you can do more with them than kind of just those kind of very basic use cases.
Yeah. That's a very interesting sort of arc here. And the reason I say it's interesting is because of you mentioned Mike. See examples of this a lot when teams have like AI first team members within their org, their adoption of it, the deployment of it is drastically goes on a different trajectory than when that resource is not there internally. And one of those sort of aspects of this podcast is we want to share like some of the best practices around that. So I want to ask you, like, looking back at that decision, I mean, I don't know if you hired Mike as a AI first developer or he turned out to be. Is it a good path for other folks to think through and like bring some of those resources on their team?
He was hired more so just to be a developer and to help with, the website and some of the other integrations that we were working on at the time. But like I think because we had started, during COVID and in 20, relatively recently, we just were aware of a lot more tools that are out there that like it's not like we're hiring a bookkeeper just to handle some of this stuff. Like it makes way more sense for us to set up a tool that can kind of handle it for us. And then in addition to that, I think to your question, as far as like how that pushes the organization, I definitely think that, having, well, frankly, like people that are just really well versed in AI. I mean, we've been using like ChatGPT and like just, their conversational tool in the company basically since it came out, because we do a ton of, like resident communications or stuff that we kind of just run through there and we're like, hey, can you just improve this email or this, this form or this letter or whatever it might be. But I think like, the one challenge that we have is there's a ton of different systems that we use. I don't know, this is probably the case for most industries, but especially with respect to ours, we're using a procurement software. We're using, like I said, our ERP or property management software, and just trying to get all of that stuff to kind of work together and like, being familiar with the APIs that each of them use. Like you kind of just need people that both can do the development work and then also who are familiar with AI and see where that fits into the puzzle.
That's a very good point. Yeah, I think the challenge is that as folks adopt different AI solutions for different parts of their operation? How do you make sure it's well integrated? And how do these different AI solutions support that? It's very interesting that the way you went from, hey, like we're using this for one problem, the next problem, and the next problem. And I wanted to ask about like life before you adopted these things. Were there a period where you're like, okay, you're starting doing things manually, and then you're like, okay, this is a good AI adoption candidate, or because of your setup and your team composition, you're like, no, 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 let's first try it with AI, and then if it doesn't work, we go to manual operations.
Well, I think so. We had initially, we were small. We had just like one or two properties, back in 2022.
Right.
So we were able to kind of handle everything by ourselves manually. And then as we kind of continued to scale, we were like, okay, this is actually, I mentioned the credit card receipt, but we also pay, 200 utility bills every single
Yeah.
month as well.
Mhm.
So, Mike actually helped spearhead, like, I think back in 22 or 23 when he came aboard, it was more like, can we create a script to do some of this stuff? And then as AI has kind of improved and kind of become, much more heavily used, we've kind of been like, okay, we can create a script, but AI can also do this piece of it and then push it into, wherever it needs to go, from an API standpoint.
So it was a force majeure kind of thing where you're like, okay, we are doing this manually, but as we're scaling, this is not feasible anymore. Like we need to find something that is doing this at scale, but better, reliable, so you can, it allows you to expand and grow.
Right.
Um,
Like I can't spend
yeah,
a full day of my week
yeah,
working on utility bills. Like we need a
yeah,
better solution here.
yeah. The utility bills, that is an interesting space. I've worked with that sort of particular problem a lot, and it is very like if you're not using any software solutions in there, it's very manual heavy work. Like there's different components of it. Some of it is even hard to do with AI, which is how do I access these utility invoices? Like some of them you get a link, you have to go download and do all of that, just accessing the information. And then the second part is okay, now that I have it, the processing part might have been addressed to some extent with AI technology. But I think the remaining challenge of how do I get these bills, I think is still out there.
Right. Yeah. Actually, we've just started partnering with a new utility, provider who kind of will help us with this because essentially we're getting to the scale where we have, like I said, 12 properties, but that means probably roughly 30 different utility providers between,
Right.
water, sewer, electricity, gas, whatever it might be, and then, internet cable. And to your point, they all 30 of them work roughly different in most
Yeah.
cases. Some
Yeah.
of them you can access the bills online, some of them are mailing them to you. So you have to kind of create these different workflows for those different, you know, different utility providers. But definitely like there's it's more difficult than just having like say one or two providers and you can run a script off of those. You kind of need
Right.
to have a more flexible solution for how the different utility companies kind of handle their billing.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I sometimes think about what is the right approach. I don't see utility companies necessarily all get aligned and follow a protocol. It has to
Right.
be some middle layer that is going to have to be capable of handling all sorts of different utility providers. But that I think that remains one of the unsolved time intensive portions of utility management.
Yeah, the larger electrical or gas companies, say for example, like Consumers or Duke Energy, like those you can kind of figure out, but it's going to be always you're going to always have those like one-offs, like City of Nashville or whatever it
Yeah.
might be that kind of handles things a little bit differently, and like they so you kind of have to have a good solution for all of them, not just for like the bigger players that might have some type of integration.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. In your quest when you were just trying, it seems like you're doing a lot of like experimentations. You're like, hey, I want to try AI for this to see if it works or not. But do you have any stories where like AI surprised you in its ability to do something that you're like, oh wow, I didn't think it could do this.
I think from a software standpoint or from a coding standpoint, it certainly is like improved to the point where,
Right.
and our developer Mike could probably talk about this a lot better than I could, but like the amount that you can kind of get done with it, and it handles like it doesn't handle everything. Like I had mentioned, the different integrations, like you definitely need a human involved on that side of things right now. But I think just like the pure coding is exceptionally good. And then from where it surprised me otherwise, conversationally it's very good. We kind of most people know about that. But we're looking at different kind of use cases, whether it be, looking at leases or like I mentioned at compliance files. Like it's probably going to get to the point where it's a lot better than a human. So like you're just going to have a human look at like what the AI produced as like an
Mm,
audit of those.
right.
But I think like from that standpoint, it'll be a lot more similar. I mean, people are seeing it everywhere else, whether it be driving or whatever. Like it's going to be better than like just someone going through a 50-page file to audit it.
Yeah, it's a good segue to sort of my next question is that, it seems like you're like, okay, I want to try this. And then as you're validating this new application, which is this AI powered application, um, you have decision points. You're like, okay, this is good or not good. We want to go back to some other solutions. So when you are making decisions around, hey, I want to adopt AI for this portion of the operations, what are some of the key decision factors that you always sort of go back to? It's like, okay, does it check these boxes? That you can share with folks here to think through, okay, these are the validations that I need to run for AI powered solutions before I adopt them.
Yeah, I think, well, everything kind of needs to be validated that's coming from AI, at least, especially during those testing phases. And I think that what we've found is, for the most part, what we're getting back is like accurate to a certain extent, but like maybe the prompt needs to be massaged a little bit.
Right.
And you've helped out a lot, and Kolena's helped where we've been like, hey, this doesn't look accurate. Maybe it might, for example, on like some of the math related stuff that we were doing, whether it be like calculating incomes or I know you guys have that data analysis tool, like that needed to be added in some cases. Otherwise it was throwing some quirky math back to us where we were
Yeah.
like, that doesn't make sense. So I do think like you definitely need to validate it. And then where you're seeing those issues, for example, whether it be math related or whatever, trying to figure out, okay, is this just not going to be a good solution for this, or can you layer on some type of? I think that your data analysis tool has some type of Python code that basically does
Right.
the math so that it's not kind of hallucinating to a certain extent.
Yeah, totally. When we started, like just to give you sort of the background behind that too, we started working of building these things many years ago. And I mean, like we see the improvement in sort of AI's capability, but even to this day, doing semi-complex, I want to say even math, is when you get discrepancies. The discrepancy might not be, oh, this was 12,000. It told me it's 5,000. It might be, rounding issues. It might be, and which is very important for accounting purposes. So that's why we thought about this data analysis tool, which is basically if you want to do math, and it's very deterministic. Math is by nature, so we'll just write code that just runs on the input data, and I think that kind of solved a lot of these cases. So I always am very, when I'm talking to folks, say, hey, just be careful, use AI for extracting information and use code deterministic approaches for doing some of those complex sort of math related tasks there, which kind of speaks to this actually, like you mentioned a couple of use cases of compliance, invoice processing. Tell me a little bit about those success stories of AI adoption and basically share some of the mistakes, quote unquote, you went throughout the process so that folks listening to this don't have to repeat the same steps there.
Yeah, I think, well, for us, with respect to, like I said, we kind of are using AI, on the credit card app and some other areas successfully. With respect to the stuff that we've pushed through Kolena, I mentioned the invoices. So, we one of the successes we set up a webhook with our PM, a property management software. So we're able to, I mean, every single day we receive like kind of the similar invoices, but they need to be coded to the right property, the right GL, et cetera. So we've set up the prompt where it can receive an email from one of our vendors. It'll extract, however many invoices were included in that email. It could be like 1 to 10, basically. It'll create a line item for each invoice, which is, gets pushed to our property management software. So, we really don't have to do a lot of that manually entry. Then as a result of kind of that success with respect to that one vendor, we basically set up with using the same webhook, multiple different agents for other vendors as well. So like it knows kind of the vendor, we kind of upload a file so that it knows like the vendor ID with respect to getting pushed in because it's going to need to kind of match up with the API that we're using. So that was very successful, and we use it roughly every day. And then we've kind of started to, okay, this works for this vendor. Let's try it on other vendors that we're kind of getting the same stuff for, using the same webhook. So there's really not a lot of extra work allowed or required, so to speak. So that's been very helpful. We were actually run a couple of other cool agents. So for example, we get a mileage report for a lot of our employees that are going to different properties and different areas. And so we actually just upload. We have a basically like almost what I would say is helpful is, first of all, we had to isolate on the API. Okay, this is the data that we need. So we need like the property ID, we need like the GL ID, the vendor ID, and then from there we upload. Okay, these are the locations that these folks are going to. For this location, it needs to be this property. So we actually upload roughly 50 to 100 row Excel spreadsheet for someone's mileage. The AI agent will go through it and figure out, okay, this trip was for this property, this property, this property. We then have it summarize each property. So we, obviously creating an invoice for each property, and then that gets pushed to our property management software as well. So that one was very successful. And then in addition to that, we've used it for quite a few other things from just an accounting standpoint, but then we receive basically like, one check for a group of residents that might be, on the same, housing voucher, whatever it might be. And so we actually upload that with the resident. We get like basically a payload of resident information from the API. So we upload both of those, and it'll basically create a spreadsheet so that we can just upload those payments into our property management software without doing, the manual, okay, this payment goes to this person, this goes to this person, et cetera. One of the use cases we're doing either on a, daily, weekly, or monthly basis.
And I think, I mean, just reading from between the lines, basically, I think the good practice that you employed here was, we're going to build this, try it for one vendor, see if it works, how well, address the issues, and then expand it to other vendors and basically go to full mode production, which I think is a very smart way of going about building and deploying any solutions, specifically using non-deterministic models, which are all the AI models. I think it's a very, very smart way of going about it.
Right. Yeah. And I think for us, like, how it's a game changer to have the API hooked up. So there's like no other kind of work that we really have to do. And then also what we've done is set up the email intake as well, which has been super helpful for, if I'm on the road all the time, so I'll just forward it over and it gets done and I can kind of get it filed away, et cetera.
Yeah. Hopefully not while you're driving.
Usually while I'm driving.
That's great. For these use cases, like you seem to have really cool stuff that you automated. What does that enable you and your team to do? Like, where are you spending that time that you would have spent on this? What does that unlock for your company?
Yeah, I mean, for me in particular, and probably for the other people that are using it, like, for example, we have our compliance folks using it as well. So I think they're using it almost as like a double check on. So they're going through these files themselves, but they're also using the AI agent as like, so I think it catches stuff that they might not have caught otherwise. So it might not be like a a great time saver for them, but for myself and like a lot of this like daily invoice stuff, it's helped tremendously. So I could just work on higher level stuff with
Interesting.
respect to, on the properties or whatever it might be.
Right. Yeah, the on the compliance piece, what we see success is basically keeping the human in the loop. That's still like that decision is still very important, but just helping them with accessing to data, extracting the right information, putting it in front of them, providing some summaries that you can just beginning of a thread, something that they can pull and go and say, okay, though, this is actual issue. And this compliance is, just to be clear, is like affordable housing compliance checklist for the folks that are filling in, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, every person that moves into one of our affordable housing properties, they're required to, it's 30 pages, 40 pages of documentation. So in what we did was create probably 15 to 20 different compliance checks that are kind of prompted out individually. And so, making sure that the IDs are included and the information matches what the person had actually put on the form, and then what actually we're putting into the, what's ending up on that final file as well. Because usually there's a kind of almost like a cover letter that the our folks are putting together for purposes of each file. So it's doing both a lot of checks to make sure that all the information's there, it's all accurate, it all matches, and then it even double checks on, like as I mentioned, some of the math side of things too. So making sure that we didn't mess up a calculation here or there.
Yeah. It seems like you and the team, you especially, you're pretty hands-on in building these workflows and agents. And it seems the team is really successful in adopting these different agents at different parts of the operation. What advice do you have for folks in the industry in terms of the steps to adopt and roll out a solution? Because I believe that's different than, hey, I use ChatGPT. That's a very simpler path to adoption. When you deploy a process that's automating something, it's a whole different ballgame. So tell us about your experiences, best practices that you think folks should think about and follow when adopting AI solutions to optimize their processes.
Yeah, I think, well, so some of like some companies have kind of come out and saying that they're actually tracking like the token usage for their employees. Like, I'm not sure if I would like sign off on that per se. But we're monitoring the AI tools that we're using and looking at, okay, this is what our usage was. I do like the Kolena ability to kind of, you basically can check each agent and see how much of our credit spend or token spend is being used on each agent. So we do that actually at least twice a month, and we check in with basically the people who are using it and saying, hey, if you're not using it, why aren't you using it? And if you are using it, what do you like about it? What's it doing well? What's it not doing well? Do we need to make changes to the prompt that would be more useful to you long term? Do we need to maybe copy this agent or spin it out and test it with different prompting that might kind of produce a little bit more useful result for you? So we're not holding our employees to a certain standard as far as like how much they need to use it, but we are checking those usage statistics to see, okay, why are we using it, or why are we not using it in many cases? And if so, what can we change about it that would make it more effective for them?
That that's a very good advice of going about sort of diagnostic analysis of adoption across the company. And in terms of like finding use cases, because not everybody is thinking about this. They're just in the operations, they're dealing with day-to-day tasks. What advice do you have, or how do you, what do you have saying that work to surface these use cases, get people to be involved in coming up with ideas and automations? Do you have things in process, processes in place that allows for these use case discoveries that you found successful?
For us, we're such a small team that we're like, we kind of need to know exactly what people are doing on site, or what's taking up, whether it be our compliance folks or our regional managers, like what's taking up a lot of their time and what can be offloaded. So we don't really have like a true like process in place to say like, hey, you're spending 2 or 3 hours on this. Like, let's try to get an agent involved to help us out with it. But I think there's a lot of things that in our industry that we kind of do, like I said, on a pretty regular interval, that we can say, okay, this could probably be offloaded into an agent, whether that be, lease audits or any of these other, I had mentioned invoicing tasks or anything like that. The more creative ones, I do, the compliance one has been super helpful. I think there's probably other use cases similar to that. One, some stuff we do on not a one-off basis, but on a less frequent basis, but it takes a long time. So like doing a lease audit when we're purchasing a property or right after we purchase a property, like that's something that like that should be handled by an agent. We don't have to do it all the time, but when we do it, it's pretty time intensive. So we're looking at a lot of those other use cases, and even from analyzing properties, whether it be pushing a rent roll or income statement or any of the other things that we look at from a due diligence standpoint when we're looking at properties, we're basically just kind of testing out the accuracy and the effectiveness of those agents to analyze those versus us going through it kind of one by one. Yeah.
That's very good. We do see, like on the due diligence side, you mentioned few of the very good examples that we see: rental, lease audit. Lease audit is because rentals come in such different shapes depending on who you're getting it from. Again, we see there's a lot of manual work involved there, and lease audits are such an important part of an acquisition because most of the time we see the property report that you received, like the rental, it might not be up to date. It might have discrepancy. It might not have captured specific fees and deposits correctly. And that lease audit is such an important step. And I think that's one of the great use cases for AI to take care of because it can do a good job at extracting, putting the information in front of the person responsible for the due diligence. And that person could say, okay, like these are the issues that I need to solve for, but these are the issues that I don't need to care about.
Yeah, it's super nuanced as well. We've found that using an AI agent actually is probably more accurate than a person going through it and then making a spreadsheet and trying to figure out like, okay, these are the things that need to be checked on, or these are the issues that need to be resolved with respect to these leases. I think long term, all of that will just be through an agent that'll kind of provide a report back to the people on site or whoever's handling it to be able to kind of resolve those issues quickly. So they're spending less time on the actual audit and more time fixing the issues that were found.
Right, totally. So you've been in the industry for a long time. You've seen all the different sort of technologies that have come up. You've now very deep into sort of adoption of AI and agents and the workflow. Where do you think this is going? Like, what does the future look like in your view as it relates to sort of your property management operations and AI?
Yeah, I mean, what we're seeing, so we kind of talked a lot about like the back office stuff, but what we're really starting to roll out right now is more leasing that is customer facing, or what we call lead or prospect facing. So we operate 12 properties, but some of them the manager's only there for 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week. People are reaching out to that property all the time. So an AI agent is basically going to respond to those in real time, right when at the time that the person's trying to get information. That's going to be a huge game changer just from a leasing standpoint. Then also we're looking at other tools that follow up on renewals or follow up on delinquent balances. There's another tool that we're going to adopt that basically will intake maintenance issues, especially after hours maintenance. So that's a challenge that we have at every property management company has this. Like someone's sink is leaking after hours. Usually they have a person that's got a cell phone or is in some call tree. They're receiving those calls and diagnosing whether it's an emergency or not. So we're seeing good tools now, finally, that can diagnose whether it's an emergency, let the resident know, hey, this is an emergency. We're going to dispatch someone, or this is not an emergency. Someone will be there on Monday morning type of thing. So those areas for more like customer facing AI has gotten so good. Like we've never been like a call center company where you call in and a call center handles it. We've always taken like much more kind of personal approach. Like we want someone who is familiar with the property, is going to be meeting you there to respond to your inquiry, so to speak. But so I think the AI agent is going to get to a point where it'll provide all the information that they need. They'll try to schedule a tour or get someone to sign a lease. But if there's any friction, it'll get handed over to one of our leasing agents or managers to be able to kind of handle that. So that's kind of where we're
Interesting.
seeing things go in our industry in particular.
Yeah, that's really cool. And then I'm assuming that opens up more. Obviously, you can scale faster with that, but it opens up more folks to look at, um, uh, the overall health of the properties, the forecasted growth of those, and then acquisitions. It helps you focus on more quote unquote sometimes qualitative decisions, right?
Yeah. But I think for us in particular, it's more of like we want to uh, reduce the response times as much as possible. So it's actually going to be a better customer experience because they're going to be able to talk to an agent who can provide all the information that you need, who can get them scheduled for a tour. And then hopefully we'll have more tours that convert to leases or, convert to applications. So our folks will spend less time, answering some of the normal questions that you receive, but they're relatively repetitive to a certain extent. And like, they're what do you have available? What does it cost? Like all of that stuff that an AI agent can handle very well at this point, especially if they're properly integrated with the property management software. So our folks on site are going to be spending more time doing tours and doing, like you said, kind of
Yeah,
walking the property and making sure that the quality control is there with respect to the unit turns, et cetera. So we see that being, a major plus for us in particular, especially because we don't have like, a lot of personnel at each individual property.
yeah. A lot of folks are like who are not using AI like in operational perspective. They have statements around, oh, this AI is going to ruin like human relationships and how we deal with each other. But I see it as a positive because it takes care of the repetitive, sort of low value interactions, and then opens you up to have high value interactions with one another, like have human to human conversations and connections. In this case, like it's a relationship between whoever's doing the tour and a potential new resident. That experience is now so much more, has such higher quality than before when that person was busy, the schedule was all over the place. I see it as a positive that now we can focus on like important relationships.
Yeah, I think for us, like the importance is having someone involved where they can like, when you're on the phone and you say agent and it takes another 5 minutes to actually speak to a human like that, in our opinion, is obviously a very, very poor customer interaction. So like
Right.
it needs to be able to hand over to a person quickly where if a question gets raised that, the AI agent can't answer. So you're not in this like annoying loop where they're kind of giving either a non-answer or not actually, providing you with the information that you need. But I think it's finally gotten to the point where, there's not a big latency on the response times. So you don't always know that you're talking to an agent. So I think that's important for a customer to know. But then also like what we've seen is when we tour properties or have prospects who come in who have toured properties that use AI agents, some of them have a negative experience only if they can't talk to a human when they want to. But if it just provides like availability information or gets you set up with a tour, like there's no negative aspect of that interaction. So like I think like as it's improved, we're seeing a little bit better customer response to the agents so that it's not, I think everyone has had those bad experiences when you try to call, your bank or credit card company, whatever it might
Yeah.
be. And like, it's super frustrating because you're in like a loop with an agent that, their job is to not to get you to a human.
Yeah, totally. And those particular examples you mentioned, they started, because they're call centers, I think they have much more volume. They started some of
Right.
those older technologies where you had to press stuff and go through a flow.
Right.
I think that just have it's going to be, I would love to see all of them switch to some sort of agentic like customer support solution, but I do see that it's going to take longer for them. Those experiences really are primed for improvement.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I've actually even seen probably 5 years ago, if there was like a chat bot on a website, there's no chance I would use that thing. But
Yeah.
nowadays, we're seeing those, and I'm using them a lot more myself, and I'm like, oh, this is actually very helpful. It's better than trying to call into this call center. This is like a much more useful tool. So I think we're going to see that improve in every industry, ours included. So we want to kind of be at least on the not at the total leading edge, but definitely towards the front of the pack as far as adopting those tools.
Right. Yeah, well, listen, Brian, I'm really excited about chatting with you maybe in a year time to see how all of these initiatives are going. It's really refreshing to see um, how your company is approaching sort of adopting different solutions for different operations, how you have different checks and balances in place. You have different strategies around how to expand a use case. And I think in a year's time when we chat again, you're gonna have lots of cool stories for us to share.
Yeah,
That's great.
hopefully some more agents.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, well, again, thank you so much for taking the time to take us through your experiences, and I look forward to our conversations again in a year time.
Thank you. Yeah, likewise.
That was Brian Murphy from Newbury Residential. That's what production AI adoption actually looks like. Receipts, invoices, compliance, and leasing all running on agents with accuracy going up as they expand. Next time on the Pragmatic AI Podcast, we're sitting down with Dan Rappaport, co-CEO of Energy Savings Partners. ESP processes hundreds of thousands of utility bills every month on behalf of property managers, where a single wrong number becomes their liability. Same questions we always ask. What is actually working? If you got something out of this one, share it with someone who's still unsure where AI fits in their operation. And if you want to see what Kolena can do for your workflows, head to kolena.com. I'm Mehrad Karamlou. Thanks for listening.